When Walter and I went to visit my in-laws, my mother-in-law, who came to pick us up at the airport, said, "You can't ride in the car, so you must walk home." She snorted and turned up her nose. It's a 3-hour journey one way, and though I'm confident in my physical strength, this treatment was too much. I almost cried, but someone reached out to help me. In the end, it was mother-in-law who regretted it. My name is Jennifer. I'm 30 years old and married. I love mountain climbing, and I met my husband Walter, who is 2 years younger, in a college mountain club. Walter is handsome and popular with women, and when he asked me out, I wondered, why me? According to Walter, Jennifer moves forward silently, even on the hardest routes without complaining, and I like that about her. Walter works for a well-known corporation and earns a high salary. We've been living happily together since our marriage, just like our student days. But there's one thing that bothers me. Oh, it's a call from Mom. Sorry, I'll go talk to her. During dinner, Walter said that and hurried into his room with his mobile phone. Mother-in-law calls Walter frequently, about once every 2 days. Mother-in-law seems to adore her excellent son, and Walter is sweet to mother-in-law, making me suspect he's a mama's boy. But since she raised Walter with care, I think I should value her too. However, it seems our feelings are different. It happened before our marriage, when we went to greet my in-laws. Jennifer is 2 years older than my son? Almost 30, huh? Mother-in-law seemed displeased with having an older daughter-in-law and looked unhappy throughout. Father-in-law said, "It's fine, isn't it? Love conquers all. Jennifer seems reliable, and she's perfect for Walter, who has a weak side." But that seemed to displease her even more. Mother-in-law seemed unable to oppose father-in-law directly, so she decided to bully me without him noticing. "Oh dear, I'm sorry, Jennifer. It seems the snacks I served you have gone bad. I'll replace them right away." When mother-in-law intentionally harassed me, she would open her eyes wide, snort, and twist her lips. I had become like a zoologist, able to distinguish her expressions. "Oh, it's okay. I can eat it." I smiled and cut off the spoiled part of the dried fruit and ate it. I had learned survival skills in the mountain club. Eat what you can of the food. Father-in-law and Walter said, "Haha, that's just like Jennifer." Father-in-law added, laughing, "Honey, that's not good. Don't serve Jennifer something like that." The atmosphere remained pleasant, but... I was careless. I'm sorry. While laughing, I didn't miss her brief, sharp look and a click of her tongue. There were other instances, like when she said, "Look, I went to Italy last week and bought souvenirs," and pulled out a high-quality branded tie for Walter. For me, it was a flimsy t-shirt with a fake-looking logo that was obviously a knockoff brand. "Come on, try on the tie. Jennifer, you try on the shirt too." At that moment, mother-in-law's face showed that familiar expression, and I realized it was another harassment. No? I can't wear a tie with casual clothes." I'm not up for it right now either. I forced a smile to keep the atmosphere light, but inside I was fed up. Afterward, I only used that t-shirt for things like weeding in the summer or as a joke to show my friends in photos. I really hate even looking at it. These harassments were subtle enough that only I would recognize them as such. And when I told Walter, he would just say, "Mom's a bit quirky, so forgive her." However, the malice I felt little by little gradually wore me down. The town where we live is about an hour's drive from my in-laws, and the fact that we could easily visit them if we wanted to was also a source of gloom. Then one day, "Jennifer, I'm sorry for the sudden news, but I've been transferred. It starts next month, so please prepare." Walter's sudden transfer was decided. Walter apologized, but I was secretly relieved to have an excuse to distance ourselves from my in-laws. Plus, the new location was very close to my parents' home, so it felt like moving from away to home. Got it. Leave the preparations to me. I'll ask my family for help too. I happily proceeded with the preparations. Now I can get away from mother-in-law's petty harassment. I was anxious about our new life, but 80% of my heart was occupied by the feeling of liberation from mother-in-law. The move was completed, and I thought I could finally distance myself from mother-in-law, but... "Hello, Jennifer. Where have you been without answering the phone? You're not neglecting my son while hanging out at your parents' house again, are you?" It was another call from mother-in-law. I wanted to sigh heavily, but held back and replied, "I'm sorry I couldn't answer the phone earlier. I was in line at the checkout. Walter might be tired in this unfamiliar environment, so I want to support him with nutritious meals." Mother-in-law's calls started coming every 2 days. Although we saw each other less, we talked more. Most of the time, it was my mother-in-law unilaterally making snide remarks. "My son is sensitive, but I wonder if someone as thick-skinned as Jennifer can understand him. My son's high school girlfriend was a delicate and fragile girl, but his taste has changed quite a bit, hasn't it?" And so on, saying only things that would make me uncomfortable. Does mother-in-law have no other outlet for her stress? I felt like I had become a trash can labeled stress outlet. What hurt the most were the snide comments about children. "Jennifer, you're already 30, aren't you? What do you think about children? I wonder if you, being older than my son, can have a normal child." I was shocked that someone would say such a thing in this day and age, but since it was something I had been concerned about recently, tears flowed after I hung up the phone. What does mother-in-law think of me? Does she think I won't be hurt by whatever she says? After that, the calls kept coming frequently, but when I responded only with safe answers to avoid making waves, perhaps she found it boring and not worth bullying, so the number of calls gradually decreased. I was truly relieved from the bottom of my heart. Then, on New Year's Day the following year, my husband and I headed to my in-laws' house. They were going to pick us up from the airport.
"Hey, Walter, Jennifer, long time no see."
Father-in-law waved and greeted us. I was honestly dreading seeing mother-in-law, but father-in-law's friendliness was a relief.
"Happy New Year, Mom and Dad."
Happy New Year to you both.
"Happy New Year, I'm glad you came."
Happy New Year, Walter. Good to see you. We exchanged New Year's greetings, but mother-in-law didn't even look at me. Perhaps she was angry about my cold response to her frequent calls. It was an awkward relationship. I was thinking about how to get through this situation.
"You must be tired from the journey. Shall we take a break at the airport cafe?"
Father-in-law cheerfully suggested, seemingly unaware of the tense atmosphere between mother-in-law and me.
"Oh, that's a good idea. Wasn't there a cafe on the second floor?"
Walter responded cheerfully, and we moved to a cafe inside the airport.
"Should I drive back?" "No, I'm still an active driver."
While the men were chatting away, mother-in-law and I were silent. "Excuse me, I'm going to the restroom." After ordering, I said that and got up from my seat. "Oh, maybe I'll go too," mother-in-law said, standing up to follow me. I had a bad feeling about this. Just as the entrance to the women's restroom came into view, mother-in-law walking behind me said, "You can't ride in the car, so why don't you walk back?" Not understanding what she meant, I turned to look at mother-in-law, and there was that expression again. We're going back as a family of 3. You're a stranger, aren't you? I couldn't believe my ears. Walk back? From here to my in-laws' house? How far could that be? And calling her son's wife a stranger? While I was frozen in shock, mother-in-law continued to throw words at me. I was kind enough to call you frequently, but unlike Walter, you only respond coldly. Living near your parents' house has gotten to your head. I don't want to think of you as my daughter-in-law. You're a stranger. A stranger. Mother-in-law's voice was getting louder. I was shocked, but I didn't want to argue in public, so I answered in a small voice, yes, I understand. I didn't feel like going back to where Walter and father-in-law were, so I headed to the airport exit, plodding along. Even though she told me to walk back, this was an airport. There must be taxis and buses. I could go as far as I could and walk from there. But more than that, what face should I make when I safely arrive at my in-laws' house by walking? How should I spend the few days of my stay? That weighed more heavily on my mind. For now, I searched on my mobile phone for transportation to my in-laws' house. There was a bus leaving in just 10 minutes, but that bus wouldn't go near my in-laws' house, so from there, it seemed I would have to walk. It might take about 3 hours in total. 3 hours. I can walk that. With my legs trained in mountain climbing, it's not impossible. But there's a difference between walking for mountain climbing and walking because I'm not allowed in the car due to harassment. Tears welled up in my eyes. Was it my fault? If I had been pleasant on the phone even after being told such things, would this have happened? As I was walking along, lost in thought, I was suddenly tapped on the shoulder from behind.
Jennifer, why are you walking here?
The voice was father-in-law's.
Didn't my wife say something to you at the entrance to the restroom? I was going to the restroom too, and I saw you and my wife talking, and then you started to go somewhere, so I followed you.
Looking at father-in-law's kind face, the tears that had been welling up in my eyes overflowed and ran down my cheeks.
Jennifer, what on earth happened?
I decided to tell father-in-law the truth. Actually, I told father-in-law exactly what mother-in-law had said, and he became angrier than I had ever seen him.
How dare she say that to my son's wife?
Then he said something I never expected.
I'll walk with you, Jennifer.
With that, father-in-law stood in front of me and started walking. Father-in-law?
Don't worry, I enjoy mountain climbing, and I used to climb a lot with Walter when he was little. A 3-hour one-way walk is nothing.
Indeed, father-in-law's stride was firm, not what you'd expect from a 62-year-old.
Come on, let's go.
We didn't tell Walter we were leaving. Is that okay? I finally remembered that. In my shock at mother-in-law's words, I had just left.
Walter will be fine. She'll probably talk him into waiting. I'll contact him.
With that, father-in-law took out his mobile phone. It seemed he was texting mother-in-law. He told her he was walking back with me and that the car keys were in his bag. As we waited for the bus, father-in-law's mobile phone rang. Father-in-law answered, his voice filled with restrained anger. It must have been mother-in-law on the other end.
I heard what you said to Jennifer. If you're going to say that, I won't ride in the car either.
I could hear mother-in-law's panicked voice shouting from the other end. That's not it. She said she wanted to walk for exercise. How brazen. I was more dumbfounded than angry.
We'll talk when we get home.
Father-in-law hung up and shoved his mobile phone into his pocket. Perhaps because father-in-law's mobile phone was unreachable, mine started ringing next. It's definitely mother-in-law. Father-in-law and I looked at each other. What does she want now? To tell us to ride in the car? I'm definitely not answering. I decided to ignore it too. Father-in-law and I silently boarded the bus and continued to walk after getting off.
This way is a shortcut. There's a slope here for a while, but let's do our best.
With father-in-law occasionally giving advice, it felt like we were mountain climbing together. However, I hadn't planned on walking so much today and was wearing regular boots. Father-in-law was wearing leather shoes. This will surely hurt our feet. During the journey, I hardly spoke, but I did ask once, Father-in-law, are your feet okay? Won't walking for a long time in those shoes hurt your feet? Father-in-law glanced at my feet and squinted.
I guess we're in the same boat. Making a woman walk such a long distance in those shoes. I can't believe her.
Father-in-law sighed. We both thought of calling a taxi, but neither of us mentioned it, intending to spite mother-in-law.
But Jennifer, you're strong. Walking such a long distance without complaining? Walter must have been attracted to that quality in you.
Hearing that, I felt a little happy. Afterward, we continued to walk, buying drinks from vending machines and a grocery store to stay hydrated. About 3 hours later, as the sun began to set, we finally arrived at my in-laws' house. Their car was parked in front of the house. Mother-in-law and Walter must be home.
We're back.
As father-in-law opened the front door, Walter rushed over.
Dad, Jennifer, I was worried. What happened? Why did you suddenly decide to walk back for exercise? Did you hear that from Mom? That's not it. Mom told Jennifer to walk back.
Father-in-law said, looking understandably tired, as he sat down on a chair near the entrance. Mother-in-law, who had come out of the living room, was pale and gaping. No, that's not it. That's not it. It seems there was a misunderstanding. What was the misunderstanding? I couldn't keep quiet any longer. You said, since you can't ride in the car, why don't you walk back? Didn't you? This was the plain truth. I hate lying. Thanks to that, I was reminded of my mountain climbing club days. A 3-hour one-way walk was good exercise. Walter looks back at mother-in-law. He knows well that I'm not the type to lie. The eyes of father-in-law, Walter, and I were all on mother-in-law. What? You believe this woman over me? We three are family. This woman is a stranger, right? You believe a stranger over your family? Mother-in-law screamed. So, I was not allowed in the car because I'm a stranger, I said quietly.
Mom, I can't believe you would say something like that. Jennifer is an important part of my family. I wanted you to feel the same way.
Walter said, clenching his fist. His hand was trembling with anger.
If you're going to treat Jennifer like this, I'm done with you, Mom. I won't answer your calls anymore. Don't contact Jennifer either.
Walter took my hand and said,
Let's go.
Walter, wait. Walter slammed the door and, without looking back, took my hand and started walking. A year later.
Hey, Jennifer, Walter, over here. You can see the view really well.
Walter, father-in-law, and I were mountain climbing together. Walter received a transfer order 6 months later, and we moved back to our previous home. After the incident at the New Year celebration, father-in-law decided to divorce and moved alone near our house. Climbing together on weekends had become a regular thing.
Shall we have lunch here?
At the summit, we eagerly began preparing our meal. While working, father-in-law started talking.
Mom went on a spending spree after the divorce. Even though the property division was done properly, it seems she's already in financial trouble. She might have been lonely. The divorce was tough, with all the crying and screaming. Putting some distance between us now is probably best for both of us.
That's how it felt.
she should expand her world too. Otherwise, she's the type to take out her stress on those close to her.
I listened silently to their conversation. I'll cherish my own world, so I don't have to take out my stress on others. Looking at the view from the mountain with my precious family, I made that resolution in my heart.